She stood alone in a formation of elite SEAL operators, the only woman in a sea of hardened warriors. The Admiral approached with a smirk that promised humiliation. "Tell us your call sign," he demanded loudly, knowing she hadn't been assigned one, his final public move to prove she didn't belong. Laughter rippled through the ranks as all eyes turned to witness her shame. But when she answered with two words, "Iron Widow," the Admiral's face drained of color, his ceremonial glass shattered on the floor as he staggered backward. In an instant, the room transformed from mockery to stunned silence. The woman they had dismissed for months was the ghost operator, whose name was spoken only in whispers. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you value stories of underestimated heroes finally receiving their due recognition, we invite you to subscribe and join our military stories community. The morning sun cast long shadows across the immaculate training grounds of Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado. 20 operators stood in perfect formation, their postures identical except for subtle differences that only the most trained eye could detect. Lieutenant Commander Arwin Blackwood occupied the end position, her stance a fraction more precise than those around her. Admiral Hargrove moved slowly down the line, his weathered face revealing nothing as he inspected each operator with the scrutiny that had made him a legend in special warfare circles. At 62, he carried his compact frame with the same efficiency that had defined his 30-year career as a SEAL. 3 rows of ribbons adorned his chest, each representing classified operations spanning 4 continents and 3 decades. When he reached Arwin, he paused a beat longer than necessary. His steel-gray eyes searched for any imperfection in her appearance, any justification for the criticism he clearly wished to deliver. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood," he said, his voice carrying across the silent formation, "your cover is precisely 1 centimeter off regulation alignment." Though her cover was perfectly positioned, exactly as regulation demanded, Arwin's expression remained neutral. "Yes, sir. I'll correct it immediately, sir." A smirk flickered across the face of Lieutenant Orion Thade, the square-jawed team leader, positioned 3 spots down from Arwin. The micro-expression conveyed what everyone knew, but none officially acknowledged. Admiral Hargrove had made it his personal mission to ensure the Pentagon's pilot program integrating women into SEAL teams failed, and Lieutenant Commander Blackwood was his primary target. Commander Zephyr Coltrane, the training officer overseeing this advanced combat leadership program, maintained his professional demeanor despite the obvious tension. At 42, with 17 years in special operations, Coltrane had seen the changing tides of military culture and adapted accordingly. He harbored his own doubts about female operators in certain combat scenarios, but he kept these concerns separate from his duty to provide equal training to all qualified candidates. Today's evolution will focus on extended maritime extraction under enemy observation, Coltrane announced after Hargrove had completed his inspection. Full combat load, 15-mile offshore approach, structure infiltration, and package retrieval. The operators maintained their disciplined silence, but subtle shifts in posture revealed their response to the announcement. This was an advanced exercise usually reserved for the final week of training, not day 15 of a 30-day program. "Command has accelerated the timeline," Admiral Hargrove added, his eyes briefly flicking toward Arwin. "Some candidates may find the adjustment challenging." The implication wasn't lost on anyone present. The timeline had been modified to test Arwin's limits before she could fully acclimate to the program's rigors. As the formation disbanded to prepare for the exercise, Lieutenant Thade brushed past Arwin with deliberate force. "Hope you're a strong swimmer, Blackwood. Extraction weights got mysteriously heavier overnight." Arwin made no response, maintaining the same composed expression she'd held throughout the morning briefing. Only the slightest tightening around her eyes betrayed any reaction at all. In the equipment room, Arwin methodically checked her gear, her movements economical and precise.
When she lifted her tactical vest, she noted the subtle difference in weight distribution. Someone had added approximately 2 pounds to the left side, enough to create imbalance during a long swim without being immediately obvious. Rather than report the tampering, she silently redistributed the weights, compensating for the sabotage without drawing attention. As she worked, Captain Vesper Reeve entered the room, her naval intelligence insignia standing out against her otherwise unmarked uniform. "Lieutenant Commander," Reeve acknowledged, with a nod that conveyed more than simple recognition. "Captain," Arwin responded, her tone neutral, but her eyes communicating something unspoken. Their brief exchange drew curious glances from the other operators. Captain Reeve's presence at the training center was unusual. Naval intelligence typically maintained distance from special warfare training operations unless something extraordinary was occurring.
As they prepared to board the transport helicopters, a communication officer approached Arwin with a secure tablet. "Priority message, Lieutenant Commander, eyes only." She accepted the device, entered a complex authentication code, and read the message in seconds before returning the tablet. Nothing in her expression revealed the content of the communication, but those watching closely might have noticed the subtle squaring of her shoulders afterward. The helicopter's rotor wash created small dust devils as the operators boarded in sequence. When the aircraft lifted off, Arwin's eyes tracked its ascent vector with unusual precision, automatically calculating wind speed and direction in a manner that spoke of experience beyond standard naval aviation familiarity. Commander Coltrane, seated opposite her, noticed this subtle tell. His eyes narrowed slightly as he reassessed the quiet officer whose file contained so many redacted sections and vague references to specialized deployment experience. 15 miles offshore, the Pacific Ocean churned with 4-foot swells under overcast skies, challenging but not impossible conditions for experienced maritime operators. As the teams prepared to enter the water, Admiral Hargrove's voice came through their communication systems. "Extraction packages positioned at the northwest corner of the target structure. Teams will compete for retrieval. First team to secure package and return receives priority selection for next month's classified deployment." The announcement changed the exercise dynamics instantly. What had been designed as a collaborative training evolution was now a competition, one that would incentivize the other operators to ensure Arwin's team failed. Lieutenant Thade's team entered the water first, disappearing beneath the surface with practiced efficiency. Arwin's 4-person team followed 30 seconds later, with Arwin taking point position despite not being the designated team leader. Beneath the waves, the operators moved with the eerie coordination of those who had made the ocean their domain. Through the green-tinted water, Arwin led her team with hand signals that were subtly different from standard SEAL protocol, more efficient, more precise, drawing from a lexicon that seemed expanded beyond traditional training. Lieutenant Estris Kelwin, the junior member of her team, noticed the difference immediately. He'd graduated BUDS training just 8 months earlier, but even with his limited experience, he recognized that Arwin's underwater communication style reflected techniques he'd only heard rumors about, techniques supposedly developed for deep cover operations in denied maritime territories. When they reached the target structure, a decommissioned oil platform used for training exercises, Arwin paused at the submerged entrance. Her team expected her to follow standard protocol: surface reconnaissance, team positioning, synchronized entry. Instead, she made a single hand gesture none of them recognized before disappearing into the structure alone, leaving her confused team to either follow or abandon their point operator. Inside the platform's flooded lower level, the exercise suddenly felt anything but routine. Visibility dropped to less than 5 feet, and the structure's metal groaned under pressure changes from the rising tide. Training sensors on the walls simulated enemy detection systems programmed to respond to standard SEAL approach vectors and evasion techniques. Arwin moved through the space like a ghost, her path seemingly random to her teammates, but systematically avoiding every sensor trigger point.
It wasn't luck. It was intimate familiarity with systems her colleagues had never encountered in training.
When they reached the package, a weighted case containing classified materials, Lieutenant Thade's team was already there, having approached from the opposite direction. Thade himself had hands on the package, a victorious grin visible even through his rebreather. What happened next occurred so quickly that later accounts from team members would contradict each other. Arwin executed a maneuver that momentarily disrupted visibility, created a tactical advantage through deliberate current manipulation, and somehow, without direct confrontation, resulted in her team securing the package while Thade's team found themselves responding to a perceived secondary threat that didn't actually exist. As they extracted from the structure, package secured, Lieutenant Kelwin couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something beyond the capabilities taught in any SEAL training program he'd encountered. The woman leading them through the dark waters moved with the absolute certainty of someone who had done this under actual combat conditions, not training scenarios.
Back aboard the command vessel, Admiral Hargrove received the exercise results with poorly disguised displeasure. Time differential was minimal, he noted, dismissing Arwin's team's clear victory, and unconventional tactics suggest poor adherence to established protocols. The mission parameters prioritize successful extraction over methodology, Admiral, Arwin responded, her tone respectful but unflinching. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Protocols exist for a reason, Lieutenant Commander. Creative interpretation of rules might work in training scenarios, but real combat operations require disciplined execution of established tactics. A flicker of something, perhaps irony, perhaps challenge, crossed Arwin's face before her features returned to their usual composed neutrality. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. From across the deck, Captain Reeve observed the exchange with careful attention. When her eyes met Arwin's, a silent communication passed between them, one that carried years of shared understanding.
That evening, as the operators gathered in the Advanced Training Center's briefing room, Commander Coltrane announced the week's culmination ceremony. As is tradition for this program, each operator who successfully completes advanced combat leadership training receives their official call sign during the final ceremony. These call signs reflect the qualities and achievements that define you as special warfare operators. Lieutenant Thade glanced meaningfully at Arwin. "Some traditions are earned, not given," he said, just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Admiral Hargrove will personally present each operator with their call sign," Coltrane continued. "The ceremony includes representatives from SOCOM, Naval Special Warfare Command, and several partner forces. It's a significant milestone in your careers." After the briefing, as operators dispersed to their quarters, Captain Reeve intercepted Arwin in a secluded corridor. "The Admiral has made his position clear," Reeve said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Has he compromised the operation?" Arwin asked, her own voice equally low. "No, he's behaving exactly as expected," Reeve replied. "The final assessment comes at the ceremony. All parameters remain unchanged." Arwin nodded once. "And the package?" "Arriving tomorrow, 7 years to the day." A shadow passed over Arwin's features. Not fear, but something deeper, more complex. Memory, perhaps, or resolve. "Will you maintain position?" Reeve asked, studying Arwin's face with the attention of someone who knew exactly what to look for. "Until the mission is complete," Arwin confirmed. As they parted ways, neither woman noticed Lieutenant Kelwin standing in the shadows of an adjacent hallway, his expression troubled by the cryptic exchange he'd just overheard. The following days brought a series of increasingly demanding training evolutions, each seemingly designed to isolate or disadvantage Arwin. Yet through each challenge, she maintained a level of performance that was precisely calibrated, never failing, but never demonstrating capabilities that might draw undue attention. During a tactical planning exercise, Lieutenant Thade deliberately excluded her from key strategy discussions, then criticized her contribution as insufficient during the formal debrief.
Admiral Hargrove, observing the session, nodded approvingly at Thade's assessment. "Operational planning requires comprehensive situational awareness," the Admiral commented, something that appears to be lacking in certain participants. Commander Coltrane frowned slightly at the obvious bias, but maintained his professional demeanor. All teams achieved mission objectives within parameters. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's team actually registered the lowest casualty projection. Theoretical projections are meaningless compared to actual field experience. Some types of experience can't be simulated or trained for. They must be lived. The statement hung in the air like a challenge, the implication clear. Regardless of her performance, Arwin lacked the combat experience that defined real operators. Later that afternoon, as the teams prepared for night infiltration training, Lieutenant Kelwin approached Arwin cautiously. Since witnessing her unusual capabilities during the underwater extraction, he had found himself reassessing everything he'd assumed about the quiet officer. "Commander," he began hesitantly, "that maneuver you used at the oil platform, I've never seen that approach before." Arwin continued checking her equipment, her movements methodical. "Improvisation is sometimes necessary in fluid situations, Lieutenant." "With respect, that wasn't improvisation, that was a practice technique. I've been trying to find it in the advanced tactics manuals, but there's nothing even close." She paused briefly, assessing him with eyes that revealed nothing of her thoughts. "Not everything worth knowing appears in manuals, Lieutenant." "Where did you serve before this assignment?" he asked, the question that had been circulating among the operators since her unusual performance. "That information is classified beyond your current access," she replied, not unkindly, but with finality that discouraged further inquiry. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Thade and several other operators. "Sharing secrets, Blackwood, or just explaining why you'll need extra time on tonight's evolution?" "Simply discussing equipment configurations, Lieutenant," Arwin replied, her voice neutral. Thade's eyes narrowed slightly as he noted the specific layout of her tactical gear, which differed subtly from standard arrangement. "That's not regulation configuration. It's within acceptable parameters for this evolution. Commander Coltrane approved the modification." Something in her calm certainty seemed to irritate Thade more than open defiance would. "Just because they've lowered standards to accommodate you doesn't mean we have to pretend you belong here," he said, dropping all pretense of professional courtesy. Lieutenant Kelwin tensed, uncomfortable with the open hostility, but unwilling to intervene against a superior officer. Arwin simply continued her preparations, offering no visible reaction to the provocation. "We should focus on mission readiness, Lieutenant. The evolution begins in 30 minutes. Thade moved closer, deliberately invading her personal space. "You think because you've survived 15 days of this program that you understand what it means to be a SEAL. You have no idea what real operators face in the field. The life and death decisions, the weight of command when everything goes wrong and there's no support coming." For the first time, a flash of something dangerous appeared in Arwin's eyes before she controlled it. "I understand more than you might think, Lieutenant." "Prove it then. Tonight's evolution, your team against mine. No restrictions, full tactical autonomy. Let's see what you're really made of when the rulebook goes out the window."
Commander Coltrane's voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Lieutenant Thade. This program isn't about personal competitions." "With respect, Commander," Thade argued, "competitive pressure reveals true operational capability. Isn't that the point of this entire program?" Coltrane considered this, then glanced at Arwin. "Lieutenant Commander, your thoughts?" "I have no objection to Lieutenant Thade's suggestion," she replied calmly. "Battlefield conditions rarely conform to training parameters. Adaptability under pressure is a valuable skill to assess." Something in her response seemed to surprise both Thade and Coltrane, though for different reasons. "Very well," Coltrane decided. "Tonight's evolution will feature direct competition between teams. Standard safety protocols remain in effect, but tactical approaches are at team leaders' discretion." As the operators dispersed to complete their preparations, Captain Reeve appeared beside Coltrane. "Interesting modification to the training schedule," she observed. "Not my preference," Coltrane admitted, "but sometimes revealing moments emerge from unexpected situations. "Indeed they do, Commander," Reeve agreed, her gaze following Arwin as she moved efficiently through her pre-mission routine. "Sometimes that's precisely the point." The night infiltration evolution unfolded under a moonless sky, perfect conditions for the type of covert operations SEALs specialized in. Both teams inserted via fast rope from helicopters into densely forested terrain 5 miles from their objective, a simulated enemy communication center. Fade's team moved with aggressive confidence, taking the most direct approach possible while maintaining reasonable cover. Their progress was rapid and efficient, exactly what would be expected from experienced operators. Arwin's team, by contrast, seemed to disappear entirely. Their tracking beacons showed minimal movement for the first 30 minutes, causing the command center to wonder if they had encountered technical difficulties. "Blackwood's team appears stationary," Admiral Hargrove noted with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Perhaps the terrain is proving more challenging than anticipated." Commander Coltrane studied the tactical display with professional interest. "Their position suggests they may be gathering intelligence rather than moving directly toward the objective. Or they're stuck and too proud to call for assistance," the Admiral suggested. Captain Reeve's expression remained neutral as she observed the tracking data. Only someone looking very closely might have noticed the slight tension around her eyes as the minutes ticked by, with no apparent movement from Arwin's team. At the 1-hour mark, Lieutenant Thade's team had covered nearly 70% of the distance to the objective. Their progress was textbook perfect for a standard SEAL insertion. They will reach the objective at least 30 minutes before Blackwood's team even gets close, Admiral Hargrove predicted. "This should conclusively demonstrate the performance differential I've been documenting." The words had barely left his mouth when the tactical display erupted with alerts. The simulated enemy communication center, which should have been unaware of any approaching forces, had suddenly gone to high alert status. All indicators showed they had detected Thade's team despite their textbook approach. "What happened?" Hargrove demanded. "Did someone trip a sensor?" Commander Coltrane's brow furrowed as he studied the incoming data. "Negative. The alert appears to have been triggered by communications intercept, not physical detection." As they watched, Thade's team was forced into defensive positioning, their planned approach now compromised. The element of surprise essential to mission success was completely lost. "Where the hell is Blackwood's team?" the Admiral asked, scanning the tactical display for their position. The answer came moments later as new alerts flashed across the screen. The communication center's security systems were failing in sequence, their carefully designed defenses disabled by what appeared to be a coordinated electronic and physical breach from an unexpected vector. "They're already inside," Coltrane realized, genuine surprise evident in his voice. "But how? Their beacons never showed approach movement." Captain Reeve's expression remained carefully neutral. Perhaps Lieutenant Commander Blackwood found an alternative approach method.
Within minutes, the simulation showed Arwin's team had secured the objective and neutralized all opposition without firing a single simulated shot. Meanwhile, Thade's team remained pinned down by superior enemy forces, unable to advance or retreat without sustaining significant casualties. The command center fell silent as the implications became clear. Not only had Arwin's team succeeded where Thade's experienced operators had failed, but they had done so using tactics that none of the observers, including Admiral Hargrove, could readily identify or explain. "I want a full debrief immediately upon their extraction," Hargrove ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This evolution was clearly compromised somehow." Captain Reeve and Commander Coltrane exchanged a brief glance before returning their attention to the tactical display, where Arwin's team was now executing a textbook extraction, moving with the same ghost-like efficiency that had characterized their entire operation. "Yes, sir," Coltrane responded professionally. "I'm certainly interested to hear Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's explanation of her team's approach." The debriefing room crackled with tension as Lieutenant Commander Arwin Blackwood stood before the tactical display, methodically explaining her team's infiltration approach. Admiral Hargrove sat at the center of the observation table, his fingers steepled before him, eyes narrowed with barely contained suspicion. "We utilized a non-standard insertion technique," Arwin explained, her voice measured and professional. "By diverting along this ravine system, we avoided the primary sensor grid entirely. That ravine doesn't appear on standard topographical maps," Commander Coltrane noted, studying the display with genuine interest. "It's a seasonal drainage feature, only visible during certain months or after studying historical satellite imagery." Lieutenant Fade leaned forward, his earlier confidence replaced with reluctant curiosity. "Even accounting for the ravine, your team covered that distance in impossible time. We employed a modified equipment configuration," she continued, displaying images of her team's gear arrangements. "By redistributing weight and utilizing alternative carry methods, we increased movement efficiency by approximately 22%. Admiral Hargrove's jaw tightened visibly. "These modifications aren't part of standard SEAL tactical doctrine." "No, sir. They're adaptations developed for specific operational requirements," Arwin acknowledged. "They remain within regulatory parameters while optimizing performance for this particular terrain profile." "And the communication intercept that compromised Lieutenant Thade's team?" Hargrove probed. "How exactly did you manage that without specialized equipment?" For the first time, a flicker of hesitation crossed Arwin's face. "We repurposed standard-issue communication gear with modified protocols." "Impossible," Thade interjected. "Standard gear doesn't have that capability." "Not with standard configurations," Arwin agreed, "but with certain adjustments learned during previous deployments, functionality can be significantly expanded." Admiral Hargrove slammed his hand against the table, the sharp sound cutting through the room. "Enough evasions, Lieutenant Commander. You employed classified techniques outside the scope of this training program, techniques that you have no documented training or authorization to utilize." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Arwin. Even Captain Reeve, observing from the back of the room, tensed slightly at the direct confrontation. "With respect, Admiral, my full operational history and training record contains classified sections that aren't accessible at this briefing security level. I have Alpha 9 clearance. There is no operation conducted by Naval Special Warfare that I cannot access." Something subtle shifted in Arwin's expression. Not quite a smile, but the barest hint of knowledge held in reserve. "Yes, sir." The simple acknowledgement carried implications that rippled through the room. If Hargrove's Alpha 9 clearance didn't grant him access to Arwin's full record, then whatever operation she had participated in existed outside standard Naval Special Warfare command structures, something theoretically impossible for a naval officer of her rank. Captain Reeve stepped forward smoothly. "Admiral, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's team achieved all mission parameters with exceptional efficiency. For training purposes, that outcome should be our primary focus." Admiral Hargrove's eyes darted between Reeve and Arwin, clearly sensing layers of meaning in their exchange that he couldn't fully decode. "This isn't over, Lieutenant Commander. Commander Coltrane will complete the standard debrief. I expect your team's full report on my desk by 800 tomorrow." As the Admiral departed, the atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Thade studied Arwin with new intensity, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the quiet officer who had just outmaneuvered his experienced team using tactics he couldn't identify despite years of special operations experience. "Dismissed," Commander Coltrane announced after completing the formal debrief requirements. "Excellent work by both teams under challenging conditions." As the operators filed out, Lieutenant Kelwin lingered behind, waiting until he could approach Arwin privately. "That drainage ravine," he said quietly. "It doesn't appear in historical satellite imagery either. I checked." Arwin regarded him steadily. "You have good attention to detail, Lieutenant. My father served in special reconnaissance. He taught me that what isn't said often matters more than what is said." Lieutenant Kelwin hesitated before continuing. "Whatever you're really doing here, Commander, I don't think it's what Admiral Hargrove believes it is. Focus on the training, Lieutenant. This program has valuable lessons for everyone involved." Before he could respond, Captain Reeve appeared at Arwin's side. "Lieutenant Commander, a moment of your time." Kelwin nodded respectfully before departing, leaving the two women alone in the debriefing room.
Reeve activated a small electronic device that emitted a subtle hum,
establishing a localized counter-surveillance field. The Admiral is accelerating his inquiries, Reeve informed her, voice low despite the security measures. He's requested your complete service record directly from Naval Personnel Command. They'll provide the official version, Arwin replied calmly. Yes, but he's also reaching out through unofficial channels, former teammates, previous commanding officers. As expected. Reeve studied her face closely. He's growing desperate. That makes him dangerous. It also makes him predictable, Arwin countered. The culmination ceremony is in 3 days. Everything remains on schedule. And if he attempts to remove you from the program before then, he won't, Arwin said with quiet certainty. His pride demands public vindication, not administrative maneuvers. He needs to prove he was right about women in special operations, especially to the visiting dignitaries and command staff. Reeve nodded slowly. The package arrived this morning. Secure storage in my quarters until the ceremony. Any word on our ghost? Still silent. But if our theory is correct, they'll make contact at the ceremony. It's their last opportunity. Arwin's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. 7 years is a long time to wait for answers. Some missions require patience above all else, Reeve reminded her, deactivating the counter-surveillance device. We're close, Arwin. Don't lose focus now. The following morning brought a new evolution. This one focused on close-quarters battle techniques in urban environments. The training facility had been configured to simulate a multi-story structure with complex interior architecture, challenging even experienced operators' tactical movement and decision-making. Admiral Hargrove observed from the elevated control room, his attention fixed on Arwin with predatory focus. Beside him, a visitor in the uniform of a Marine Corps general studied the proceedings with professional interest. The female officer, the general noted, Lieutenant Commander Blackwood. Her file crossed my desk last week. Impressive qualifications. On paper, perhaps, Hargrove replied dismissively. Reality often proves less impressive than administrative documentation. I understand she's performed exceptionally well in this program so far, the general pressed, including yesterday's night evolution. Hargrove's expression tightened. Temporary successes in controlled training environments don't translate to sustained combat effectiveness. General Hayes, my concern remains the long-term viability of female operators in Tier 1 special operations roles. A concern not universally shared across Joint Special Operations Command, Hayes observed mildly. The data increasingly suggests that properly selected and trained female operators provide unique tactical advantages in certain scenarios. Before Hargrove could respond, alarms blared through the facility. On the monitoring screens, a training scenario had suddenly escalated beyond planned parameters. Smoke filled one section of the structure as warning indicators flashed across the control panels. "What's happening?" Hargrove demanded. The technical officer manning the control station worked furiously at his console. "Sir, there's been a malfunction in the simulation system. The fire suppression protocols have activated with actual incendiary components rather than training markers." "Evacuate the structure immediately," General Hayes ordered. "Negative," the technician responded, his voice tight with concern. "The malfunction has triggered security lockdown. Standard access points are sealed until the system can be reset from the main control node inside the structure." On the monitors, operators could be seen reacting to the emergency. Their training exercises forgotten as actual smoke began to fill corridors and rooms. Most teams moved efficiently toward alternative exit points, their special operations training seamlessly transitioning from simulation to real-world emergency response. But one team found themselves in a rapidly deteriorating situation. Lieutenant Thade and 3 other operators were trapped in a section where the smoke was densest, their path to extraction blocked by a security door that had sealed during the malfunction. "Get me communications with the team," Hargrove ordered.
Comms are intermittent due to the security lockdown. Last transmission indicated they were seeking alternative egress through the east utility shaft. On another monitor, Arwin's team could be seen moving with purpose, not toward an exit, but deeper into the structure. Their movement pattern suggested a deliberate approach to the control node, the only location where the malfunctioning systems could be manually overridden. "What is Blackwood doing?" Hargrove demanded. "Her team should be evacuating." General Hayes watched with focused interest. She appears to be addressing the source of the problem rather than its symptoms.
The monitoring system flickered as smoke increasingly obscured the camera views. Partial images showed Arwin's team encountering an unexpected obstacle, a collapsed ceiling section blocking their path to the control node. Without hesitation, Arwin redirected her team, sending them toward an evacuation route while she continued alone. "That's a direct violation of protocols," Hargrove noted with sharp disapproval. "No operator proceeds without team support in hazardous conditions." Hayes made no comment, his attention fixed on the monitors as they tracked Arwin's progress through the increasingly dangerous environment. Her movements displayed none of the hesitation or uncertainty that might be expected in such conditions. Instead, she navigated the smoke-filled corridors with the confidence of someone operating from perfect mental mapping of the complex structure. When she encountered the sealed door separating her from Thade's trapped team, she bypassed the electronic security system with techniques not taught in any naval special warfare training program. The door released, allowing the trapped operators to move toward safety. "How did she override that security protocol?" Hargrove asked, unable to completely mask his surprise. Neither Hayes nor the technicians offered an explanation. All attention now focused on Arwin as she finally reached the control node. Despite the increasingly hazardous conditions, her movements remained precise and economical as she executed a complex sequence of commands that gradually restored normal system function. Within minutes, the facility's fire suppression systems activated properly, clearing the smoke and allowing full evacuation of all personnel. Emergency medical teams entered to assess any potential injuries, finding remarkably few given the severity of the malfunction. In the aftermath, operators gathered at the medical checkpoint for evaluation. Lieutenant Thade, still being treated for minor smoke inhalation, watched as Arwin calmly reported to Commander Coltrane. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she had just executed an emergency response that should have been beyond the capabilities of a standard SEAL officer. "How did you know the bypass sequence for those security doors?" Thade asked when she passed near his treatment station. "That's proprietary technology. Even I don't have that clearance." Arwin paused, meeting his gaze directly. "Sometimes training includes elements that don't appear in standard documentation, Lieutenant." "That wasn't training," he pressed. "Nobody gets trained on proprietary security overrides except—" He trailed off, a new understanding dawning in his expression as he studied her with fresh assessment. "Except who, Lieutenant?" she asked quietly. Before he could respond, Admiral Hargrove approached, his face set in grim lines. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, my office, now."
The Admiral's office reflected his personality, austere and meticulously organized with nothing out of place. Naval Special Warfare memorabilia lined the walls, a testament to a career spent defining what it meant to be among America's elite maritime operators. "Explain yourself," Hargrove demanded, once the door closed behind them. "How did you access those security protocols?" "Standard emergency override procedures, Admiral," Arwin replied, standing at perfect attention. "Don't insult my intelligence, Commander. Those weren't standard overrides. That was a proprietary sequence known only to system developers and certain specialized units." "Then perhaps my previous assignments included relevant training, sir." Hargrove moved around his desk, deliberately invading her personal space. "I've reviewed every accessible record of your service. Annapolis graduate, naval intelligence for 3 years, lateral transfer to surface warfare, then selection for the Female Integration Pilot Program. Nowhere in that history is there any indication of specialized training in advanced security systems." "Not all training appears in accessible records, Admiral.
"I have the highest possible security clearance," he snapped, frustration evident in his voice. "Yes, sir, you do," she acknowledged, the simple statement carrying implications that visibly unsettled him. Hargrove stepped back, reassessing the officer before him with growing suspicion. "Who are you really working for, Blackwood? CIA? DIA? Some shadow unit I'm not supposed to know about?" "I'm a naval officer assigned to complete this training program, sir. Nothing more." "We both know that's not true." He studied her face, searching for any crack in her composed exterior. "The culmination ceremony is in 2 days. Several very senior officials from various service branches will be attending, specifically to observe the female integration program's results." "Yes, sir, I'm aware of the schedule." "Whatever game you're playing ends now, Commander. I won't allow my training center to be used as a stage for someone else's agenda." "No games, Admiral, just completing the mission as assigned." Something in her phrasing caused Hargrove to pause, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features before his expression hardened again. "You're confined to quarters until further notice. I'm initiating a full security review of your presence in this program." "That would violate direct orders from Naval Special Warfare Command regarding the pilot program's integrity, sir." "I am Naval Special Warfare in this command, Commander, and I will not be manipulated by whatever shadow game you're playing." Their confrontation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Without waiting for permission, Captain Reeve entered, her expression professionally neutral, though tension radiated from her posture. "Admiral, General Hayes has requested Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's presence for an operational debrief regarding the facility malfunction." Hargrove's jaw tightened visibly. "The commander is currently engaged in a security review, Captain." "I understand, sir. However, the general was quite specific about needing her immediate input on the technical aspects of the system override she implemented." The standoff stretched for several seconds before Hargrove relented with poor grace. "Very well, but this conversation isn't finished, Commander." "Of course not, sir," Arwin replied with perfect military courtesy that somehow managed to convey nothing of submission. As they left the Admiral's office, Reeve led Arwin not toward any meeting with General Hayes, but to a secure communication room in the facility's restricted section. "We have a problem," Reeve said, once they were alone in the secured space. "The malfunction wasn't a malfunction. It was deliberate sabotage of the training systems." "Are ghosts making a move?" Arwin asked, her composure never wavering despite the implications. "Unclear, but the sabotage utilized access codes that should have been disabled after the Songhuan incident, codes specifically tied to Admiral Hargrove's authentication profile." Arwin absorbed this information with the calm assessment of someone accustomed to processing critical intelligence under pressure. "He's forcing our hand, or someone is forcing his," Reeve countered. "The timing is too perfect, 2 days before the ceremony, just as key observers are arriving." "Has the Admiral's movement been tracked since the incident?" "Continuously. He hasn't attempted any unauthorized communications." Arwin considered this. Then either he's working with someone inside the facility or someone else is using his access credentials. "Either possibility represents a critical security breach," Reeve noted. "We need to accelerate the timetable." "No," Arwin decided after a moment's consideration. "Changing plans now would alert whoever is making these moves. The ceremony remains our best opportunity to force exposure. It's also the highest risk scenario, with multiple flag officers and foreign observers present." "Which is precisely why it's the perfect moment," Arwin countered. "No one would attempt something truly catastrophic with that level of security present. This is about manipulation and exposure, not direct action." Reeve studied her colleague's face, seeing the absolute conviction behind her composed exterior. 7 years is a long time to carry this mission. Arwin, some debts can only be repaid in full." Before Reeve could respond, the secure communication system activated, indicating an incoming message with the highest priority designation. The screen displayed a simple text, "Widow Protocol initiated. Stand by for package delivery." Both women recognized the significance immediately. The endgame had begun.
Whether they were ready or not, the ceremony hall gleamed under carefully directed lighting. Naval Special Warfare Command had spared no expense for this particular culmination event, transforming the utilitarian training center auditorium into a space worthy of the distinguished guests in attendance. Naval flags flanked a stage where a ceremonial display featured the SEAL trident prominently. Officers in dress uniforms and foreign military attachés in their respective formal attire created a sea of medals, ribbons, and insignia, representing decades of combined special operations experience. Admiral Hargrove stood center stage, resplendent in his full-dress uniform, with rows of decorations testifying to a legendary career. Behind him, Commander Coltrane and Captain Reeve occupied positions of prominence alongside other senior officers. The graduating operators sat in the front row, their posture reflecting the discipline that had carried them through the grueling Advanced Combat Leadership program. As the formal proceedings began, the atmosphere carried the weight of tradition and earned respect. Admiral Hargrove approached the podium, his weathered features solemn as he addressed the assembled crowd. For over 60 years, naval special warfare operators have represented the pinnacle of American military capability, he began. The men and now women who earn the right to serve in these units do so through extraordinary demonstration of physical strength, tactical expertise, and unwavering character. His emphasis on the word earn was subtle but unmistakable, especially to those familiar with his views on gender integration. Tonight we continue a tradition that dates back to the earliest days of naval special warfare. Each operator receives their call sign, a name that will follow them throughout their special operations career. These names aren't chosen lightly. They reflect the essence of the operator, often commemorating a defining moment that revealed their true character under pressure. The ceremony proceeded with practiced precision. One by one, operators were called forward alphabetically, despite the previous announcement regarding seniority order, a change that caused subtle reactions among the graduating class. Each received a ceremonial chalice containing salt water, symbolizing the element in which SEALs were born as operators. As they drank, Admiral Hargrove announced their call sign and its significance. "Lieutenant Orion Thade," the Admiral announced when Thade's turn came. "Your instructors and peers recognize your exceptional leadership during the Omen training evolution, where your decision-making under extreme conditions ensured your entire team's survival. You will be known as Beacon." Thade accepted the chalice with evident pride, drinking the salt water before exchanging a salute with the Admiral. As the ceremony continued, the operator's row gradually emptied until only Arwin remained seated. The change in order had been yet another calculated move to isolate her at the conclusion, a final public reminder of her outsider status. When all others had received their call signs, Admiral Hargrove paused dramatically before addressing the assembly again. As many of you know, the integration of women into special operations roles represents a significant change to our historical composition. While the law follows lawful directives regarding this integration, it remains the responsibility of command to ensure all operators, regardless of gender, meet the unwavering standards that make our forces the world's most capable. The message beneath his diplomatic phrasing was clear to everyone present. "Lieutenant Commander Arwin Blackwood," he finally called, his voice carrying a subtle but unmistakable challenge. Arwin stood, her movement economical and precise. She approached the stage with the measured cadence of someone completely in control of every muscle, every expression. Nothing in her demeanor suggested anxiety or uncertainty, despite the obvious tension in the room. Admiral Hargrove held the ceremonial chalice, studying her with eyes that had assessed countless operators throughout his career. "Lieutenant Commander, you have participated in our Advanced Combat Leadership program for the requisite period. Before assigning your call sign, perhaps you could share with our distinguished guests your most significant operational achievement to date." The request deviated from protocol. No other operator had been asked to justify their presence or qualifications. A settled murmur passed through the audience as the impropriety registered. Arwin's expression remained perfectly composed. "With respect, Admiral, my operational history includes classified deployments that cannot be discussed in this setting." A thin smile crossed Hargrove's face. "Of course, most convenient." He turned slightly to address the audience. "Call signs reflect achievement, character,
proven ability under fire. They are earned through demonstrable exceptional service.
Arwin accepted the chalice with steady hands, her gaze never leaving the Admiral's face. "Iron Widow, sir." The two words fell into absolute silence. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire room had been suddenly evacuated of air. Admiral Hargrove's expression shifted from smug certainty to confusion to dawning horror in the span of seconds. The chalice slipped from his fingers, crashing to the stage floor and shattering into glittering fragments. Salt water spread across the polished wood like spilled secrets. "That's not possible," he whispered, all pretense of ceremony forgotten. "Iron Widow is a classified designation. You can't possibly."
7 years ago, Arwin continued, her voice steady and clear enough to carry throughout the now silent hall. 6 SEAL operators were captured during a compromised intelligence operation in North Korea. They were held at a black site facility designated Songhwan, presumed irrecoverable due to the political sensitivity of their presence in denied territory. Color drained from Hargrove's face. His hand moved to the edge of the podium for support. Those operators included then-Captain Victor Hargrove, Arwin continued. After official rescue operations were deemed too risky, a specialized asset with the designation Iron Widow executed an unsanctioned extraction, recovering all 6 operators despite sustaining significant injuries during the mission. From the audience, Lieutenant Thade stood suddenly, recognition transforming his features. "You carried me 3 miles through mountain terrain with a broken femur," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never saw your face. They told us you were a local asset." Captain Reeves stepped forward then, removing her naval intelligence insignia to reveal the stars of a rear admiral. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's identity as Iron Widow has remained classified at the highest levels for operational security. Her placement in this program was the final phase of a 7-year counterintelligence operation to identify the source of the original mission compromise. Admiral Hargrove swayed visibly, his face ashen. "This is irregular," he managed, though his voice had lost all authority. "This ceremony has protocols."
Indeed it does, Admiral. Rear Admiral Reeve interrupted. "Protocols that don't include singling out specific operators for public humiliation based on personal bias." From his position in the audience, Commander Rohr stood next, followed by 2 other operators who had been part of the captured team in North Korea. As one, they rendered a formal salute to Arwin. Not the casual acknowledgement of a ceremony, but the profound respect offered to someone who had saved their lives at great personal risk. The gesture spread through the room as other special operators recognized the significance of what was unfolding. Within moments, nearly every military member present was standing at attention, saluting the woman they had just discovered was a living legend within their community. Admiral Hargrove sank slowly into the chair behind him, the weight of recognition and shame visible in every line of his body. His carefully orchestrated humiliation had transformed into his own public undoing. Arwin finally broke her composed silence. "Permission to address the assembly, Admiral Reeve." With Hargrove clearly incapacitated by shock, Reeve nodded. "Granted, Commander." Turning to face the still-standing audience, Arwin spoke with quiet authority that nonetheless carried to every corner of the hall. 7 years ago, I made a promise to 6 men I pulled from that facility. I promised that I would find who betrayed them, no matter how long it took or how high up the chain of command the betrayal went. She unpinned something from inside her uniform jacket, the widow spider brooch, which she now attached visibly to her collar. That mission ends tonight, with the identification of the compromised source. Every eye in the room followed her gaze to Admiral Hargrove, whose expression now showed the dawning horror of a man who realized he had been under investigation for years.
The mission was compromised through a security breach at Naval Intelligence involving an admiral's access codes. Those codes belonged to Admiral Victor Hargrove, whose terminal was accessed while he was supposedly in a classified briefing. "I was in that briefing," Hargrove protested weakly. "I couldn't have—" "You left the briefing for 23 minutes," Rear Admiral Reeve interjected, a fact confirmed by multiple witnesses and security logs. "During that time, your personal codes were used to access highly classified information about the North Korean operation." "That doesn't prove intent," Hargrove argued, desperation entering his voice. "It could have been negligence, leaving my station unsecured. Which is why Lieutenant Commander Blackwood was assigned to this program," Reeve finished, "to observe your reaction when confronted with the operative who saved the men your negligence nearly killed. Your systematic attempts to break her, to drive her out of the program, revealed a pattern of behavior consistent with someone desperately trying to protect their reputation at all costs." The hall remained silent as the full implications became clear to everyone present. Whether through negligence or something worse, Admiral Hargrove's actions had nearly cost 6 operators their lives, and for 7 years he had never acknowledged responsibility, instead building his reputation on their successful rescue, while simultaneously working to undermine the very programs that had made that rescue possible. In the heavy silence that followed, Lieutenant Thade stepped forward. Without speaking, he removed his newly awarded trident pin and placed it on the stage before Arwin, a profound gesture of respect that acknowledged her as the true embodiment of everything the insignia represented. One by one, other operators followed suit, until a small collection of trident pins lay at her feet, a spontaneous recognition of her status among them that transcended formal ceremony or official designation. Admiral Hargrove watched this unprecedented display with visible distress. "This is highly irregular," he repeated, though his protests sounded hollow even to his own ears. "On the contrary, Admiral," Rear Admiral Reeve replied, "it is the most authentic expression of special warfare values I've witnessed in decades. These operators recognize one of their own, perhaps the best among them, regardless of gender or background. They honor excellence, courage, and sacrifice, precisely as they were trained to do." Turning to Arwin, Reeve continued with formal precision. "Lieutenant Commander Arwin Blackwood, call sign Iron Widow, you have completed the Advanced Combat Leadership Program with distinction. Your operational record, including 7 classified extractions and the Songwon recovery mission, places you among the most accomplished special operators in naval special warfare history." She extended a small case containing a special warfare insignia modified with a small red hourglass symbol. "By authority of Naval Special Warfare Command and with the concurrence of the Joint Chiefs, you're hereby officially designated as the first female operator in the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, effective immediately." As Arwin accepted the insignia, the room erupted in applause, not the polite acknowledgement of ceremony, but the genuine recognition of those who understood exactly what they were witnessing, a moment when truth and justice aligned to correct years of misconception and prejudice.
In the aftermath of the ceremony, the training center buzzed with activity as security personnel discreetly escorted Admiral Hargrove to a waiting vehicle for transport to Naval Intelligence Headquarters. The official story would involve his sudden retirement for health reasons, but everyone who had witnessed the evening's events understood the reality. Lieutenant Thade approached Arwin as she stood speaking quietly with Rear Admiral Reeve. He waited respectfully until their conversation concluded before stepping forward. "Commander," he acknowledged, the respect in his voice genuine, "I owe you an apology. Several, actually." Arwin studied him with the same calm assessment she brought to everything. "You were operating under false assumptions, Lieutenant. We all do sometimes." "Not just about you," he clarified, "about what strength looks like, about who belongs in these units." He hesitated before continuing. "I never saw your face that night in North Korea. You wore a tactical mask the entire time, but I remember your voice when you told me I wasn't going to die in that place. I've carried that promise with me for 7 years without knowing who made it." "The promise is what mattered," she replied, "not who gave it." "Maybe," he acknowledged, "but knowing now changes things for all of us.
He gestured to the other operators who had been part of her program, now gathered in small groups, their body language and expressions completely transformed from the dismissive attitude they had shown weeks earlier. Lieutenant Kelwin approached next, his expression one of newfound respect, tinged with lingering curiosity. "Commander, if you don't mind my asking, how did you maintain cover for so long, even under the extreme conditions Admiral Hargrove created?" A hint of what might have been amusement flickered across her usually composed features. "SEAL training teaches endurance under pressure, Lieutenant. I simply applied those lessons in a different context." "Will you be staying with the program now?" he asked. Before she could answer, Rear Admiral Reeve rejoined them. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood has a new assignment effective immediately. Her experience will be invaluable in reshaping our special operations protocols for future integrated teams." As others gathered to offer their congratulations and respect, Arwin maintained the same composed demeanor she had shown throughout the program. Only those who knew her best might have detected the subtle signs of emotion beneath her controlled exterior, a sense of mission completed and promises kept. Later that evening, in the privacy of her quarters, Arwin finally allowed herself a moment of genuine reaction. She removed the widow spider brooch from her collar, studying it in the dim light, a tangible symbol of 7 years dedicated to a single purpose. A knock at her door preceded the appearance of Rear Admiral Reeve. "The official debrief is scheduled for 0800 tomorrow. Naval Intelligence will want a complete accounting of the investigation and your conclusions regarding Admiral Hargrove's involvement." "Was it worth it?" Arwin asked quietly, the question not directly related to the administrative details, but to something more fundamental. Reeve understood the real question immediately. "You saved 6 lives that night in Songwon, and by completing this mission, you've likely saved countless more who would have been compromised by the Admiral's continued negligence. So yes, Commander, it was worth it." Arwin nodded slowly, replacing the brooch in its case. "What happens next?" "That's largely up to you," Reeve replied. "Your cover identity is no longer necessary. Your actual service record will be restored to active status, with all the opportunities that entails, and the female integration program will continue with your input and expertise." Reeve smiled slightly. "You've opened doors that will never close again."
1 month later, the Advanced Combat Leadership Program welcomed its newest cohort. 20 operators stood at attention as Commander Zephyr Coltrane conducted the initial briefing. Among them were 2 female lieutenants, their expressions reflecting the same disciplined focus as their male counterparts. At the front of the room stood Lieutenant Commander Arwin Blackwood, her uniform now bearing the specialized insignia of her new position as program instructor. The small widow spider pin remained on her collar, no longer hidden, but worn as an official recognition of her call sign and the legend it represented. "This program will test every aspect of your capabilities as special warfare operators," she began, her quiet voice commanding immediate attention. "You will be evaluated not on where you came from or what you look like, but on what you can contribute to your team and how you perform under pressure." Her gaze swept across the assembled operators, lingering briefly on the female lieutenants, whose presence represented the beginning of a new chapter in naval special warfare history. "Some of you may have heard stories about the recent changes in our command structure and training philosophy," she continued. "Let me be clear, the standards have not been lowered or altered. What has changed is our recognition that excellence comes in different forms and that true operational capability transcends traditional expectations." Lieutenant Thade, now serving as an assistant instructor, stood at the side of the room, his attitude toward the program and its mission completely transformed from his previous perspective. "Over the next 30 days, you will be pushed beyond what you believe possible," Arwin told the new cohort. "You will fail. You will succeed. You will learn that your preconceptions about yourself and others are often your greatest limitation." She paused, allowing her words to settle across the silent room. "And when you complete this program, you will understand what truly matters in special operations. Not who you are, but what you bring to the mission and how completely you are willing to commit to something greater than yourself." As the briefing concluded and the new operators filed out to begin their first evolution, Lieutenant Kelwin approached Arwin. "I've been meaning to ask, Commander," she said. "That night in North Korea, when you extracted Admiral Hargrove's team against impossible odds, how did you know it could be done?" Arwin considered him thoughtfully before answering. "I didn't know it could be done, Lieutenant. I simply knew it had to be done, and that was enough." The simple statement encapsulated everything that had defined her career and her approach to seemingly insurmountable challenges, an understanding that now formed the foundation of her teaching philosophy. Limitations existed primarily in the mind, and the truly extraordinary became possible when necessity met unwavering commitment. As she watched the new cohort begin their journey, Arwin recognized that her own journey had come full circle. The mission that had begun in darkness 7 years ago had finally reached its conclusion in the light of public recognition, not for her personal glory, but for the principle that true excellence deserved acknowledgement regardless of its source. The widow pin on her collar caught the morning light, its red hourglass symbol no longer a mark of secret identity, but a proud declaration of capability and service. A visual reminder that sometimes the most formidable warriors were those most easily underestimated.